is God's plan for me to continue to grow a real estate empire so that I can give away a ton of money and give it to the church and give it to good organizations to do his work? Or is the purpose of the real estate to give me freedom so that I can spend more time ministering to other men, or my wife and I ministering to other couples, and to help them find the freedom that we found through the spiritual journey that we've been on?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Brad Stegall. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic.
Well, for our listeners, you're in for a treat today. Brad's just awesome. He has a great story and really just some important lessons he's learned from his story we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. So I'm excited to get into this. Brad is a Christian husband, father, son, brother, investor, I'll say mountain biker / adventure seeker, and you know what? Just a great guy. Like I'm gonna enjoy this conversation as much or more than I think our listeners will. So I'm looking forward to it. So, Brad, welcome again. And why don't you start? Just tell me, how did we get to where we are today, and why? And why? Why do you do what you do?
Yes, as I think about, how did I end up here? Why did I end up here? It kind of takes me back to, from the very beginning, there was something inside of me that was wired a little bit differently. I remember all the way back in junior high, my parents we'd stop to get gas, and they would either buy us a piece of candy or something to eat, or you could buy baseball cards, and I wanted baseball cards because they had value, and I knew I might be able to trade them someday for something better. And then I started buying candy at the gas station, or my parents would buy the candy, and instead of eating it, I'd take it to school the next day and sell it for a profit, and then take that money back to the gas station. It's like, for some reason, I was always just wired for business. And I would say the reason that I'm in real estate today, it goes back to probably when I was 18 or 19. I was introduced to the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki that we're all super familiar with. And I learned early on that I didn't want to be stuck on the left side of that quadrant. And so one of the things that Kiyosaki says in his book is, for your first property, instead of buying a house to live in, buy a duplex. And so at the age of 24, that's what I did. That was my first property, and lived in one side and rented out the other.
For those of us that have kids, you said wired differently, like nature versus nurture. Do you think that's because of your surroundings growing up and the discussions you heard, or you just think no, that was your natural instinct?
It was my natural instinct because I had a brother and a sister, 1 year older and 1 year younger than me, and we were all raised exactly at the same time, the exact same way, and we went through the same school. And in the eighth grade, they taught all of us about certificates of deposit and how much money you could make by putting money in the bank in a CD. And I was the only one that, when we walked into the bank with my mom and we were going to open a savings account, I looked at her and like, should we check into CDs instead? And we all heard the same information, but for whatever reason, like, those were the things that stuck with me. And so I don't know why, but that's just the way I was wired.
Awesome. And then so you mentioned the left side of the quadrant, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then, so there's two books. There's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then another book that he wrote called The Cash Flow Quadrant, which has, ESBI. But just explain to our listeners real quick what that means. Because I think this is, before you do, we have real estate investors and business owners that'll listen, and employees and otherwise, right? What's the left side and what's the right side of the quadrant? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the left side, you're basically trading dollars for your hours for dollars. As an employee, you're clocking in. So that's the E. The S is self-employed. So a lot of people who are self-employed think that they're business owners, but if your business doesn't work unless you're there doing what you do, then you're truly self-employed rather than being a business owner. because you're trading those hours for dollars. Now, when you move to the right side of the quadrant, that's when you become either, at the top side, it's a business owner where you own a business, but in addition to that, you own a system. So you don't necessarily have to be there in order to earn money. And then the other half of the right side of the quadrant, which is where the passive income lives, which is the mailbox money that you just keep earning whether you show up for work or not. So you can be a business owner or an investor. And so
Yeah.
then when you're investing in real estate or businesses, stocks, bonds, anything, as long as you're investing enough to get the return you're looking for and you're not working for it, that's the life on the right side.
Yeah. And I think for our real estate investors especially, but also business owners or entrepreneurs, I think so many of us think Rich Dad Poor Dad is just a real estate book. He actually doesn't talk about real estate that much. He references it a little bit, but it's really just a different mindset around finances, I'd say, and income and assets and liabilities. And the book Cash Flow Quadrant, I also think there's a lot of I'm calling them business owners. He wouldn't. He would call a lot of us self-employed, where our business owns our
Mhm.
time, and just thinking through how we shift that to where we own a business that has a system that runs whether we are there or not. Um, and that doesn't mean that needs to be solved right away, but I think just reading books, it can educate us and realize there's a different way to do things, I guess.
Absolutely.
So you were wired different, Brad. Um, how did this then evolve into your adult years? What did that look like? What did being wired different lead to?
So I had a full-time sales job early on in life, and that gave me the ability to earn a decent income and also have flexibility. And so I bought the first duplex, lived in one side, rented out the other. 1 year later, I rented out the side I was actually living in with a roommate, and I had to go to my roommate and let him know that we were both homeless because I rented our house out. So he moved in with a buddy, I moved in
forced
with a different buddy.
forced homelessness.
Yeah, and while I was living with my friend, I was shopping and ended up finding a triplex, lived in the triplex for a year, and then my third property was another duplex. So my first three deals were all owner occupied so that I could have less money down and make my money work, go further for me.
Well, I would just say that if you're in a position, if you're younger, where you can be flexible as to where you live, you're not, I don't, maybe it's a bad term, but if you're not tied down, or whether
Yeah,
it's a relationship or kids, and you have the flexibility to live in different places, the terms for this, maybe it's house hacking, but you can
yeah,
buy actually up to a 4 unit building, and just live in one and rent the other three out and get really favorable financing terms associated with that. And then you could do that for a year and move to the next one. I mean, if someone's younger, this talk about a way to really accelerate and get ahead, and then you're doing it when you're younger and you don't have as many, I'll say, liabilities or living expenses. You can really get ahead at a very early age, and
yeah,
it sounds
I
like that's what
agree.
you did. So once you
That's
so duplex, triplex. I'll let you add to that in a second here. Duplex, triplex. Feel free to add to that, but also what came after that? What was your path?
So then I ended up, for whatever reason, I ended up just buying more duplexes and ended up with a few single family homes. And over the years, I got my portfolio to, I think, 24 or 26 units. And, looking back, I'm not sure why. There were probably a lot of reasons why, but I just decided to just cruise for a little bit. And I didn't grow the real estate portfolio much for quite some time. And I ended up, I guess it was, probably around 2018, where I started just getting the feeling that I was made for more than what I was doing. And that had to do with the sales job that I had. I'd been doing that for so long. I just it was frustrating to go to work every day because it was the same thing over and over. And so a friend of mine turned me on to Bigger Pockets podcast, Grant Cardone podcast, and started just getting re-energized and thinking bigger and started looking at real estate more aggressively and started buying more deals back in 2018, 2019. And yeah, it started to grow. And as I was listening to the podcasts, all the Bigger Pockets podcasts, not all of them, but many of them talk about the importance of having a mentor.
Yeah.
And that was something that I took to heart. and I started thinking about who the people were in the Peoria area because I live in Peoria, Illinois, that were that were big in this real estate space that I was just at that time just kind of playing around in. And there was a guy that his name's Mike, and Mike was somebody that I looked up to. And so, being a professional salesperson, networking, putting myself in the right place at the right time, gaining favorable attention, like those things, that's what I did all the time. And so I end up at some ribbon cuttings where he's at. I invited, see if he wants to go to lunch. And once we had those initial conversations, I decided, like from then on, I just needed to prove to this guy that I was a hustler. And so every single time I went to go look at a property, I'd send him a text message. Hey, Mike, I'm going to look at this. Hey, Mike, I'm going to look at that. Hey, I got the financials here. What do you think of these financials? And so he knew that I was out there like making things
Yeah.
happen.
Yep. So I want to come back. I want to talk about the mentorship. I actually want to talk about the importance of this quite a bit and just and really dig into why that is. Before I do, you know, I started buying houses in 2013, and I don't know how many doors I got up to. Honestly, I would say between 24 and 26 as well. And then in
Yeah.
2017 is when I started listening to Bigger Pockets, right, which provided a mix of motivation and education. In
Hmm.
2017, decided, okay, we're gonna shift gears and go to multifamily, and just a lot of similarities. But you said you don't know why, and you just cruised, and I want to dig into like why why do you think? Why do you speculate that you just cruised for a couple of years?
So when I look back, the one thing that I remember is I was a I wasn't necessarily friends with this person. I was aware of somebody who had gone from nothing to becoming very, very wealthy. And I watched what it did to them. And for whatever reason, at that point, I decided that being super wealthy was bad because I watched it turn this person from a good person to somebody that wasn't necessarily making as good of decisions anymore. And so that was one of the impacts.
So I want to. So now I'm going to bring in. So you know your introduction, first thing Christian. You have Ben's Jesus.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about it, but we were talking on the pre-show a little bit about the series Chosen, which we both agree is absolutely fantastic and gives so much context and education around faith. It's great, but in the Bible there is a lot of discussion about wealth, and I think a perception, maybe even a excuse, I don't know about but a perception that wealth is bad. Um,
Yeah.
how do you connect the two? If I'm allowed to put you on the spot on that one.
Oh, yeah, you can put me on the spot. I wonder, I think wealth can be both good and bad. The Bible doesn't say that money is evil. It's the love of money that is evil.
Correct.
And I think the love of anything before the love of Christ is evil, right? So the love of self, my love for working out could become evil if it
Yeah.
gets in the way of my relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I wonder if, because I've matured a lot spiritually over the last 5 years for sure. And
Yep.
so when we're looking back at those times where I decided that I didn't want to pursue wealth anymore because I thought it was evil, maybe I would have let it go to my head, right? Maybe it wasn't the right time, and maybe I wasn't spiritually ready or emotionally ready for that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I think is so there's a faith element of wealth, which I think you helped clarify, and I appreciate that. But also then, you had, we're going to come back to mentor, but you also someone else that you saw someone that was wealthy and having issues, and you associated their issues with the wealth. When like if you have issues without wealth, you're probably going to have issues with wealth. And if you are, disciplined and have faith and have a good family life without wealth, you're probably also going to be disciplined and have a good family life with wealth too. So I think being comfortable and getting to know who you are is important for whatever. It's
Yeah,
probably not going to change. Like money probably won't change you, especially if you create it yourself, because you'll probably be prepared for it and ready to handle it, I think. So either way, I want to, main point there maybe is you had someone that you saw that maybe held you back, but then you shifted to later, you had this gentleman named Mike the mentor, we'll call him,
yeah.
locally, that kind of opened your eyes, and you were proving to him, hey, I'm going to prove to him that I'm a hustler. I'm going to go work hard. What happened after that?
So he was in the middle of a 150 unit apartment complex, complete renovation. He says it was the most brain damage he's ever experienced in his life. So like it was a hard project. And while he's in the middle of this project, somebody brought a deal to him for a 20 unit apartment building. And he threw out a number that he we always call them Mike offers because they're borderline offensive. And so he made a Mike offer and they said yes. And so the problem was he couldn't say no to the offer. It was so good. But the other problem was he was so busy that he didn't have the capacity for it. And so that's when he reached out to me to see if it's something that I would want to work with him on. And the funny thing is, he said it was so good he couldn't walk away from it. But then when I used my normal spreadsheets and the way that I evaluated duplexes and houses, the way I'd done it my whole life, I'm like, Mike, this doesn't cash flow. And he goes, trust me, this is a good deal. Like, we're going
Oh
to make a lot
boy.
of money on this. It's not about the cash flow. We're going to turn this thing around. But I hadn't looked at my typical deal structures that way.
Right.
And so at that point, I just trusted him. And we did the deal as 50-50 partners. And I took care of just about everything here in the local area because he was busy on that other project.
Yeah.
And 12 months later, we sold it for 50% profit.
Wow.
So I'm glad I trusted him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did it
Yeah.
cash flow?
At the end, it did.
At the end, it did. Um, so what was this seems like a big shift for you, meeting
Yeah.
Mike, trusting Mike, putting your chips on or betting on, I think, betting on your ability to execute on this, but also betting on the deal, trusting in Mike. What did that shift for you and how did that change what you did moving forward?
Well, it shifted the way that I thought about real estate for sure. Because Mike's more of a he's a bigger thinker. He's definitely the visionary. Still to this day, I'm not the visionary of our partnership, but he's always thinking big and pulling me out of my comfort zone. And then I'm the detail organization guy that's almost like, hey, Mike, sometimes we need to slow down and let's focus on the details. So it makes a perfect partnership. But it pulled me out of my small box of thinking that a deal's got a cash flow right out of the gate, a certain double digit rate of return, or I'm not going to do it, to thinking about what can we turn this asset, what can we do and take it from where it's at, and what can we turn it into? And it's more of an equity play. And we'll have cash flow 3 years from now, but in the meantime, we're going to be grinding away, doing a lot of work, capital improvements, and 3 years from now, we're going to have a ton of equity. And then what can we do from there?
And I think what's key about that, just to clarify it for our real estate investors, is that you're not you're saying this property, once we improve it, will cash flow in today's market, but once it's improved, you're not speculating that the market's going to grow to get your cash flow. You're just saying what this property can be, what the operations, what the market rent rates can be, we will get to cash flow, and you know it pretty much when that will be, so therefore you have the cash reserves and everything in place to get you there, the capital plan, but you're not
Yeah,
speculating that the market's going to grow to cash flow. It's you have a
sure.
plan to get there.
And the other thing I would say is something we do differently than most is we're not raising money to buy deals. And so we're not raising money to fund capital improvements. We're cash flowing capital improvements. So
Okay.
when I say it's not cash flowing, it's because we're
Yeah.
using our cash flow to do capital improvements.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is we've done deals both ways. But if you can cash flow the capital improvements, when you get to the other side of those capital improvements, then all of a sudden then it gets much more fun and you can really start to cash
yeah.
flow. And then, I mean, maybe some small capital improvements that you continue to do, but not near as much. So what?
More delayed gratification, which
Yeah.
is, I think, the more I do real estate, the more I realize it's literally delayed gratification over and over and over.
It definitely is it can be a waiting game. It takes
Yeah,
patience. And I think there's different people that invest that a newer investor maybe doesn't understand like the dynamic of real estate and how it works. Like, and even it's hard to see the equity growth. A lot of times people might just be seeing cash flow, but there's equity growth
yeah,
happening. If
yeah,
operations and cash flow is improving, guess what? Your property's getting to be worth more and more as well. So you did the
exactly.
20 unit with him. You had a good exit on that. Your mindset started to shift and just change the way you think. Mike thinks bigger. Where do we go from there? What are some major pivots from there, or yeah, things that changed after
Yes.
that.
So right from that first sale where we sold it for a 50% profit, we turned that 20 unit deal into, I think it was 126 units because we 1031 into these other deals. And in addition to the 1031, we had some creative financing worked in there as well. And so with with all of those things combined, we were really able to just maximize that profit off of that first deal to jumpstart things even better. And so that was in 2020 where we did our first 20 unit deal. And now sitting here in 2024, from just that one entity that Mike and I started, we've got 311 units of residential
So
real
what
estate.
outside of the real estate, what were the big like aha like you know what you didn't partner until 2020 when you did the first
Yeah.
deal. What was your mindset around partnerships going into that, and then what would it be? What would your mindset around partnering with others be today?
I was in line with Dave Ramsey's saying, I don't know if he's the only one that says it, but he says all the time the only ship that won't sail is a partnership. And so leading up to 2020, that's kind of where I was at. I'm going to do this thing on my own. I'm going to buy my houses, my duplexes. I got to where I bought 12 units in one package on my own before I met Mike, but it wouldn't have grown to, now we acquired an 88 unit building. I never would have done that by myself. And so the idea of having a partner, I'm very fortunate that my first business partner has worked out great. We balance each other out perfectly, and when there's conflict, we are able to discuss it and come to a resolution. And we're very fortunate in that regard. But I'm so happy that I changed my mind and decided to partner with somebody on some things.
And I think for I mean like how do you choose a partner? I think it's you talk about you're more the operator, the integrator, if you were, as Mike's the
Yeah.
visionary. That's one element of like deciding on a partnership, and like you don't need two visionaries or you don't need two operators. So that's one way to look at it. But also, time and money, I think. So like, do you have a lot of time but not money? Do you have a lot of money but not time? Well, figure out which one you have and then find somebody that has the other ones, right? Experience, not experience. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. I mean, it sounded like you identified someone that had experience but not time. You had time
Yeah.
but not experience, and were those the key drivers to selecting it?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And then I have the ability to network pretty well, and so that was one of the other things in the beginning that Mike was impressed by because we had the 20 unit apartment building along with two duplexes under contract. And before we even closed on the deal, I already had somebody lined up to buy one of the duplexes from us for like a $20,000 profit, and we didn't even own it yet. And he's
Oh,
looking at
wow.
me and he's like, "How'd you do that?" I was like, "It's just networking, man. You just got to know people and what they want and connect the dots."
Yeah, but it's on. So we talked money, not money, integrator, visionary, time, not time, but also skill sets. Like if you think about all the different functions of an organization, like you have sales, you
Yeah,
have marketing, you have operations, finance, right? So if you find somebody that has all the same things across the board. Like there's a lot of different ways to make partnerships work. So the other thing I would say about your general partnership comment is just because some people had a partnership and the first one didn't go well, just because the first one,
hmm
like it doesn't mean partnerships are bad. It means you selected the wrong partner, learn from that and find a good partner. If
sure.
it can accelerate, it doesn't mean partnerships for everybody, but if it can accelerate what you're trying to do, I would say just stay open to it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about you talked about who was influential and how has your mindset shifted, not about partnerships, but it's in general. Like if you just, maybe from when you started a decade or more ago, what have been some major mindset shifts that you have had throughout kind of your journey?
Well, that could go many different ways, but I would say in the phase that I'm in now, the the shift becomes how much how much more real estate do I need? Um, what's this life all about? Who's my number one business partner? And being a Jesus believing Christian, I believe it's my Heavenly Father. And so is God's plan for me to continue to grow a real estate empire so that I can give away a ton of money and give it to the church and give it to good organizations to do his work? Or is the purpose of the real estate to give me freedom so that I can spend more time ministering to other men, or my wife and I ministering to other couples, and to help them find the freedom that we found through the spiritual journey that we've been on? So that's the number one mind shift that I'm wrestling. I
Okay,
picked up the book Vivid Vision again just this week. I'm reading Vivid Vision. I'm like, what's my vision? I don't know.
I've wrestled with this a lot. So uh, almost the same thing. And for a time period there, I was like, you know what, no more. Like we don't need to grow our real estate because it's pulling my time away um, from education and having an impact. And I think, and
Mhm.
like my mission is to inspire and educate others to live their God-given purpose, which we want to leverage real estate to get people's attention to then allow us to hopefully do that and introduce them to that, and they can take it wherever they want to go. But I've landed with, um, I guess the other thing that's changed for me is we've been able to start growing our real estate more with phenomenal team members that are aligned with our vision and our mission and
Yeah,
very supportive of it. So now it's very fun and engaging and exciting to be building our real estate business, but we're also trying to build our education business around that too. So um, that doesn't mean I think we're pretty clear on it. We've been pretty clear on it for several months now, but I wrestled with it for a really long time. And, God has a plan. And do I shift that later? Maybe. I don't know. But right now we have clarity. But that doesn't mean I'm not wrestling with it in my mind from time to time still. So,
yeah.
how do we, I guess for our listeners, like how do we people are in different financial situations, different phases in their career, whether that's real estate, business owners that say, look, I don't need to grow my business anymore. Like it's completely stable. It's good. How do I guess when you've wrestled with it, how have you thought about it, or what are some things you've thought about that have maybe given you some clarity in one direction or the other?
I'm still praying about it. So I wouldn't say that I have clarity in one direction or the other right now. The thing that I do have clarity on is that I'm in the situation that I'm currently in with the business, the property management company. So behind me is Midwest REI. We started a real estate meetup,
Yep.
and for the longest time, I'd say for the first 2 years that I did these meetups, I wouldn't pray over the meal. And I was convicted over that. It's like, why aren't you praying over the meal? I'm like, well, it's not a Christian thing. And it's like, no, everything you do is a Christian thing. So I started praying over the meal. And then, how many people do you think, Phil, got upset with me for praying over the meals at Midwest REI?
I don't think upset.
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
And how
And
many
that was
people
my
were there?
fear.
Yeah.
We usually average about 60 people at these
Yeah.
lunches,
Yeah.
but I got positive feedback that people were thankful that I prayed over the meal. And so from there developed into me taking the real estate meetup and starting the Ironman prayer lunch because I had this skill set of bringing people together. I already had the format and the layout to make this thing happen. So then I just flipped it to do a lunch for Christian men to come together and sharpen one another. And so I I think in the short term, I'm just going to look at the things that are already happening around me and how can I use those things to glorify God.
Yeah. Well, and I think it just goes, I talk about just getting clear on what your purpose is. So you've been clear on glorifying God, educate yourself, associate with others, but have courage to act and think about what those things are. And, bringing faith into the workplace, I think people think that's like a really complex thing. Well, if that's what you're thinking, like if you're wondering, can I do that with my business? First of all, if you're starting a business, you want to do that, just start right away. Like start early and
Yeah.
do it, and then it'll be comfortable and it'll be easier. But if you're further along in your business and you're unsure how to do that, I know I've talked to different business leaders here locally, and when they start doing it, like they're like, it's just amazing the things that have all of a sudden come together, connected, and people reach out and maybe not every single person will always align with it, but so just don't be critical of them. Just be open to that. So
Mhm.
it's maybe it's a sensitive subject, but I would just encourage people if you're called to do that or if you're feeling the nudge to do that, just have some courage to even bring up the conversation. Or if you're in a company, find people that maybe you can have the conversation with to, how do you bring different elements of faith into the workplace? I know we talk about it here quite a bit, and that's how we want to like one of our first core value, faith and purpose. Like we want to live on, purposefully and with our faith. So I appreciate that. I want to also ask
Yeah.
so and maybe a different one, but what like if you think about courage and taking action, what are a couple of examples of some big things that you did in the past that were, definitely out of your comfort zone, but you did them anyway. And when you look back, how does that, like, how do you reflect on that?
Um, it took a lot of courage to start the Ironman prayer lunch. And so when I reflect on that, the courage that it took in hindsight, just by the courage, it took courage for me to say yes, that I was going to do it. And then in hindsight, like as I look at how everything came together and the Lord just put all the pieces in place for me, it's incredible. But that first act of saying, I'm going to do this, and the reason it took courage is because a lot of things, failure doing something like that means more to me than failing on a duplex or failing on an apartment building, because it's me saying less yes to my heavenly Father, and then I'm going to be obedient, not necessarily knowing where things are going to go. And so the fact that I said yes and then it came together so easily is has made it easier for me to say yes in the future for things like that as well.
Yeah.
And so does that does that
It
make
does. And I
sense?
think the other, like,
Yeah,
just as like from a courage and taking action perspective in general, like the more you,
yeah.
like, so now you can take that example, um, which by the way, how many people go to that lunch? And it's an incredible amount of
Like
people.
140 guys. The first one was 180.
I
It
mean,
was amazing.
by
Yeah.
the way, so just whether it's faith or not, like what you're thinking about doing and whether you should do it or not, or have the courage to do it. Brad's sitting here thinking, should I do this or not? And he pulls the trigger, and a darn near 200 people show up for the very first one. Like, talk about your answer. Like, yeah, I needed to do. I'm very, very glad I did it. But the other thing that I hear a lot of people talk about is when you have the courage to do something and it works out, it just gives you more courage to do more things and step out on a limb
Yeah.
more in the future. So,
Well, Midwest REI
yeah,
exists because I was listening to a Bigger Pockets podcast where they interviewed Jamie Gruber talking about his multifamily and more meetup.
yeah,
And so I listened to that podcast. I realized nothing was going on around here. And that's why I started Midwest REI.
yeah. Well,
And so,
the other thing you talk so now if I go back to courage, we talk about your coaching and mentorship, and then seeing other people, hearing about other people, whether it's podcasts or just who's in your network. But I think your network, your associations, again, coaching or friends, whomever, they can get, like, when you see other people doing these things, that's certain, like, okay, this is possible. Yes, I can do that. That guy can do it. I can do it. Right? It can,
yeah.
those things can give you courage as well. So, um, if you think about, so I appreciate the conversation on courage for your, whether it's your team members, on-site managers, contractors. How would you say you're the, to me, I understand you're the operations lead. What's your leadership style?
Leadership versus loudership. And you can lead from the front, you can lead from behind, you can lead from the side, or you can lead from within. Um, I'd say I'm definitely the lead from within type of leader. And I think there are many benefits to that. And there are benefits to all four types of leadership, but I also think there are pitfalls to each of the four types of leadership. And I think the pitfall to leading from within, the way that I do it is oftentimes I'll just get in there and just do it myself to show everybody that I'm not asking them to do something that I'm not willing to do. Leading from within, oftentimes I'll just do something myself because it's easier to do it myself than to teach somebody else how to do it.
Yep.
And so that's definitely my leadership style, but it's something that I think I need to transition out of a little bit and only use that when it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I want to lead from behind as a cheerleader.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, my two big takeaways from what you just said there. One, there's different leadership styles, and there's no one right way. Different leadership
Yeah.
styles are fine. The second one is that having self-awareness around yourself and your own leadership styles, and both the strengths of that and the potential pitfalls of that style, is also important. So just having self-awareness of your style and then adapting your style over time to be as impactful as it can, I think, is what's important. So if you step back and just think about, your real estate journey, the the Ironman prayer lunch you did, the Midwest real estate investment. If you just step back and think about everything you've done, how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Oh, I mean, it's exciting. I had lunch with a friend today having a conversation about this whole vision thing. And the hard thing about vision is, I, I don't know if this sounds good or bad. I'm literally living my dream. And so then it becomes like refiguring out what the next dream is going to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I feel blessed beyond measure. And I love what we're doing. I love the fact that I've got such a great team that last week my business partner was going to be out of town and he told me, he's like, just don't go to work. And we're just going to let the team do what they do. And you stay at home with your wife. So my wife and I had a week long date of just hanging out and doing stuff at the house. And so
What happened with the team? They survived?
they survived. It didn't burn. We kept it all together.
It's actually, they probably learned a lot. And honestly, you probably
Yeah.
recognize that, maybe how well you've done to set up the team and the systems where it's not dependent on you, which is getting to that right side of the quadrant, as you talked about
Yeah. Yeah.
at the
We've
beginning
been
of the
focusing a
episode.
lot on systems and yeah.
What do you think the key to your success moving forward is going to be?
Staying in alignment with what the Lord has in store for me. If you're walking in His direction, I think it's going to be all good.
Yeah. Amen. I love it.
That's my
Um,
number one. Yeah.
what is so last questions, and I'll kind of recap here, but just, favorite real estate book, business book, most impactful book, what has that been for you?
I mean, I've got to say Rich Dad Poor Dad because that's the reason I got into it all.
Yep.
Um,
And I
did you
found my
say business book or
Yeah,
business
no,
book
that's
or just
fine.
book in general?
I
Yeah.
found myself on Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of almost skipping it over because so many people say it, but I just want to
Yeah.
emphasize, like I did at the beginning of the discussion, the importance of understanding that book. Like, you don't have to agree with every single word, but it just makes so much sense, and it's so counter to what we learn in society in general about finances and even business and personal expenses and other things. Like, it's just very different, but when you read it, it makes so much sense. So it is really good and really impactful. And as well as, like, for business leaders, ESBI, and really thinking about, are you self-employed, or do you own a B type
Yeah.
business, as they say in the book?
And then many people are familiar with How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale
Yeah.
Carnegie.
Yep.
But when I went through a Dale Carnegie class, and the other half of the class, we read the book How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
Okay.
And that was a super impactful book for me. And obviously it applies to your personal life, how to manage worry in your life. But when it comes to business and making sure that you don't get overwhelmed by worry about all the things that could go wrong, or did you make the right decision or the wrong decision? That's been a very impactful book for me as well.
Yeah. Awesome, Brad. Well, I love it. And honestly, I think there's a lot of helpful things. The power of association in your network is really what stands out for me. And just, you know, the coach, the mentor, seeing what worked well for others and what didn't work, and even realizing with the person that was wealthy but not happy, if I'm kind of shortening
Yeah.
that, giving you awareness and just like that person impacted you, maybe in a negative way. Things happen for a reason, but being aware that your network is impacting you, and therefore being selective about your network, seeking the right network, seeking coaches, seeking mentors. I think all that's really important. So I really appreciate all the discussion, Brad. Where can our listeners, how can they find out more about you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Brad Stegall, Stegall, and our company's Acceleration Ventures. So our website's accelerationrentals.com. You can find us there as well.
Awesome. And if you're in Peoria, swing by
Hit me up.
Bradley, hit him
Let's
up, grab some coffee or
let's go
lunch,
mountain
maybe
biking
check out.
or something
That's right,
fun.
mountain
Yeah.
biking. We didn't get that. Do you have any exciting trips or anything coming up?
So just got done with the trip out in Arizona with Go Abundance. So we had
Okay.
some adventuring going on out there, some side by side action. And I don't, the next thing I'm going to do that's going to be fun is my next ski trip.
Okay.
I've got 3 trips out west to go skiing scheduled so far, and looking forward to some good powder, hopefully.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate it so much. Definitely check out Brad. Thanks so much, Brad, for coming on. You're a great guest, and we just super appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me.
For the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.